Hi, this is Sniz, World 38, Lord of Ultima. This video is going to be a quick tutorial on production buildings, basic resource production in the game. As with all my videos, I do this in one take, no script, and it is what it is, so don't expect any polish on these particular videos. So here I'm going to basically just cover how the resource mechanics work, how the multipliers work, and whatnot. The first thing is you've got three basic types of production buildings. This is for standard production. That is a quarry, a woodcutter's hut, and an iron mine. Each one of those buildings starts off at level 1, you build them up to level 10, and based on their level they have a base output. All of them are the same, and in this case at level 10 their base output is 300. And 1 to 10 it's anywhere from almost no output to all the way up to 300. Once you have the base output of the production building itself, it is modified by a combination of natural resources, which are the trees and the stones and the little iron deposits, cottages, and the what I call the super booster buildings, which are the mills, masons, and foundries. In this, I'm just going to be covering stone, wood, and iron, as they pretty much have all the same characteristics. I'll cover the other resources in another video. So basically, it's important to understand how these production efficiency booster buildings work. The first part is that you take the base production of the building itself. Any natural resource that it touches, the first natural resource it touches, you're going to get a 50% boost at what I call a tier 1 boost. And for each cottage, for the second resource it touches, natural resource it touches, you're going to get a 40% boost, as well as all other natural resources it touches. For each cottage at level 10 you're going to get a 30% boost, and at lower levels it's anywhere from 1 to 30%, but at level 10 you're going to get a 30% boost from a cottage, a 50% boost from the first natural resource it touches, and a 40% boost for all the remaining. Now the important thing on this tier 1 modifier is that all of those bonuses are additive, and you can have as many as this building touches. So if we take this particular building as an example, this quarry, it's touching 2 natural resources. So the first 2 natural resources it's touching, the first one gives a 50% bonus, the second one gives a 40% bonus. That's again a 50 and a 40. And then it's also touching 2 cottages. Each of the cottages gives a 30% bonus, and the cumulative effect of that is 50 plus 40 plus 30 plus 30. Quick math is 90, 120, 150% is the tier 1 bonus to this particular building. Now the tier 2 bonus, what I call the super booster, is from the mason here. Now the mason, the super booster bonuses can only be affected by one of them, so you don't get an additive effect from multiple super boosters, but it is a multiplicative multiplier to, or it's multiplicative to the tier 1 bonus. So where the first bonus is additive, the second bonus is multiplicative with those the first tier of bonuses. Plain English version of that is basically you take the base, you add up all the percentage boosts of the tier 1 bonuses, that gives you a subtotal, and then you take that subtotal, you super boost it, and that subtotal is boosted by the secondary booster. What that means is that these interact with one another, which makes it you get a lot more bang for the buck, I guess, is the short version of that. So again, those 3 components are you have base production plus tier 1 boosts coming from natural resources and cottages, to what I call a tier 2 boost or a super boost, which is the overbooster building, which is the masons, mills, and foundries. What this turns into is, when you get into city design, this is just a sample city that I've almost got capped out here that I'm using, but obviously you're going to get the most bang for the buck in resource production when you can use all of those factors together. Just a couple basic rules of thumb that I try to follow is that ideally, with few exceptions, your production buildings should always touch a super booster. So that's almost first and foremost. I almost never lay a production building without touching a super booster. Ideally, a super booster is always touching at least 2 production buildings, And then from there, I'm trying to get as many cottages in as possible, with the basic rule of thumb being that a cottage should touch at least 3 production buildings. At 3, for example, basically by dropping a cottage here, I'm boosting 3 production buildings by 30%, i.e. 90%, which makes it by itself almost as good as another production building. But when you factor in the element that not only is this providing 90% in total, but that's also being over boosted by, or super boosted by the tier 2, it actually turns out to be each cottage is giving you more than 100% than just another production building itself. So basic rule of thumb again is production buildings touching as many resources as possible. Typically you're building your towns around the resources that are available. I'll cover some more of that in a later video. But I typically start with working with the natural resources as much as possible, getting the most bang for the buck there. Trying to position my buildings so that they're always touching super boosters, with one exception I'll cover in a second. And then once that basic structure is in place, the more that clusters can grow together and I can get these types of positions where I can lay in cottages that are touching 3 or more buildings. In most of these cases they're touching 4 and 5 and 6 buildings each. I'm getting the most bang for the buck out of the cottages. Now the one other factor to consider, the production building is just about resources, the natural resources is only boosting resources, and the super boosters are only about resources. The cottages do have a secondary effect, and that is construction speed. Each cottage increases your city's construction speed, and that actually affects how quickly you can build the city up and start generating resources faster by getting them a higher level as fast as possible and capping a city out and moving on to the next. So a secondary concern when you're looking at cottage strategy is that having enough cottages in a town to get a reasonable construction speed is fairly important. I typically am able to stick to my touching 3 or more buildings rule and get my construction speed into the 11-1200% range. I'm typically happy with that. I love to see construction speed sitting in 14-1500%, but I tend to take the approach that in the long run I'm going to get the most bang for the buck out of a resource city by having better production in the end, even if it's a little slower to build. So anyway, when it comes to cottages, there have been a few cities that if I can't get the construction speed at least to that 11-1200% range, I'll go ahead and compromise efficiency, at least temporarily. Obviously this can be fixed later, but temporarily I'll compromise efficiency, maybe lay a cottage or 2 that's only touching 2 buildings. Just be aware that when you do that, you're getting less bang for your buck in terms of the boosting of the nearby resources, but in the end that construction speed is a fairly important factor when you're looking at your overall progress and advancement. I think that's it for this video. I'll do a few others that'll tie into this. Thanks for watching.